Let me tell you something that no one in sim racing is talking about, and it's killing your lap times. I'm talking about tire surface temperature. If you're just ignoring this and blasting around the track hoping for the best, you're leaving a ton of speed and consistency on the table. What most people don't understand is that managing tire surface temperature is not only an issue for beginner drivers, but it can also affect intermediate and even top 5% drivers. So let's talk about it. First off, we need to define what tire surface temperature actually is and how it's different from core temperature. When I say tire surface, I literally mean the outer layer of the tire that you see when looking at them. Think about it as the part of the tire that makes contact with the track itself. If that temperature is out of the optimal range, so is your grip. In contrast, core temperature is the temperature of the actual inside of the tire between the surface layer and the rim. Think about it as ambient heat. Now, because the surface of the tire is what's in contact with the road, along with it being rather thin, it means it's going to heat up faster and more easily than the inside of the tire, which collects heat from things like the surface, the brake temperature, which transfers through the rim of the car, and so on. Let's use a simple example to illustrate this a little bit better. In iRacing, there's a good chance a lot of you have done an accidental burnout coming out of the pit box, and when you come into the first corner, you realize you have absolutely no grip and oftentimes end up spinning. This is because when you did the burnout, you caused an enormous amount of friction onto the surface of the tire, which overheated it, but the core of the tire never actually got any heat because core temperature is more so gained from building lateral and longitudinal load throughout the corners, and the difference in these temperatures is what caused you to have much less grip than you were expecting. This example brings me into the whole point of this video. How can you manage and keep the tire surface temperature within the optimal window for not only one lap, but a whole race or stint? Oftentimes people don't realize, but the most common area on track to force the tire surface temperature out of the window is under the initial braking phase. For example, when coaching drivers, they usually brake slightly too hard on initial or peak brake, overheat the surface, and have to sacrifice in a later stage of the corner to compensate for overdoing the entry phase. The misconception here is that people think this can only happen in ABS cars because they think the tire's limit is when you simply lock up in a non-ABS car. This is actually incorrect, because even if you're not fully locking up in a Formula car or non-ABS car in general, there's still the possibility of shocking the front tires a little bit too much with things like micro-locking, for example, which still has the capabilities of affecting your cornering speed. It's not fully related to tire surface temperature, but a way I like to think about it is the physical braking limit versus the optimal braking limit. What I mean by this is, sure, sometimes the car might let you brake to 60% coming into a mid-speed corner without locking up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the fast way around, because we always have to be considering how much speed we're taking off and whether or not we're able to remain exactly at the limit for the rest of the corner, because each section of the corner is a consequence of the previous. Let's use this analogy I've come up with to get a better understanding of the limit in relation to tire surface temperature. Let's say there are exactly 4 parts to every corner on a track. A way we can think about it is we need to achieve an exact total of 400% grip limit after the cornering phase is over in order to be as quick and efficient as possible, meaning we need to use precisely 100% in each of the 4 sections. For example, if you abuse the ABS on entry and use up 105% of the grip limit in the first 2 phases of the corner, you'll not only abuse the surface temperature and grip of the front tires, but it also means you now need to sacrifice the latter 2 stages and only go up to 95% in each in order to stay within the 400% total. The goal here is to spread out the limit as much as possible throughout the entire corner, not simply focusing on being the fastest on entry or exit, for example. Let's now hop into the sim to get actual visual examples of what this looks like on track. Alright, so we're here in the sim, and this example is going to be Spa in the Ferrari GT3 car. And this is a really good example corner-wise and car-wise in relation to tire surface temperature, because it's a very hard braking zone, because remember we spoke about how the initial braking phase is the most common area where people can abuse tire surface temperature. And this track and specific corner is great because there's a left-hander right after the right-hander, and this is something I really want to highlight because we also have to think about if you abuse tire surface temperature in one corner, it also has the possibility of affecting the next corner, especially if it's right after. We'll talk about some long-term effects here shortly as well. Coming in here for the first example, we can see our braking trace is going all the way to 100% very quickly and very hard, so we're really abusing the ABS here. Now there's a couple factors here. There's multiple factors on why this is abusing tire surface temperature. One of the main ones, obviously, is our ABS usage. But coming into the corner, we can see just how much understeer we're getting at the apex here. So into the right-hander, lots of understeer, and the left-hander, tons of understeer as well. You can see how much steering angle we have to put in to get the car to rotate. And something I want to note here is our apex speed coming into the first apex here. So we're at about 74, 73 kilometers an hour. But if we go to the next example, where, you know, it's more of a normal braking trace, something I'd prefer to see rather than abusing the ABS so much in the previous example. And here we can see, you know, I'm capping out my brake trace at around 90%. We don't really want to go too far over that in the Ferrari. So at this point, we're just barely clipping the ABS, and you can see just how much the car is slowing down. It's actually slowing down faster because we're not in the ABS. If you remember from the previous videos, we're getting a reduction in braking efficiency anytime we go deep into the ABS system. But also, you can see I actually surprised myself with how much rotation I got after turning here. So coming into the apex, the late entry phase, you can see how much rotation I got, and I wasn't expecting to get this much rotation. So I actually hit the sausage curb here, which wasn't on purpose. But if we go to the same point in the corner, from where we looked at in the previous example, here I'm carrying 5 to 6 more kilometers an hour just by not abusing the tire surface temperature at the earlier phase on corner entry. And the reason for this is, as we spoke about earlier in the video, if you're staying under that 100% grip limit on the initial entry part, you're going to be able to spread out the available limit throughout the corner. But if you're going to, let's say, 105 or 110% of the grip limit and the tire surface temperature limit earlier on in the corner, it means you're going to have to sacrifice at the next or later stages of the corner to remain under that 400% limit per se. So another factor here, if we look, I'm getting much more rotation and more bite from the fronts into this next corner here, and I can roll on the throttle much quicker. One final note here to think about is the medium or long-term effects of abusing tire surface temperature. So if we really abuse the tires coming into that chicane, like we did on the first example, yes, it's going to affect the right-hander, yes, it's going to affect the left-hander here, but there's also a very good chance that coming into turn 1, our tires don't get to cool down as much as they would if we were following correct braking technique, and that's just going to have a snowball effect throughout the entire lap, entire race, entire stint, and you're really going to be abusing your tires. This is something to really pay attention to, especially in endurance racing. Thank you for watching.